Hello, and welcome to the Strongest Steel Podcast, episode 17. Scott Lunny, I'm the director for the United Steelworkers, District 3. I use pronouns he and him, and here we are today. I just want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional unceded territory of Coast Salish people, the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and as the steelworkers and individually, we need to continue to be committed to learning and understanding and working towards reconciliation with Indigenous people and First Nations across our district and across our country. So the topic today for the Strongest Steel podcast is a campaign for washroom dignity that we are doing in the district called Make Shit Better. So be prepared. You'll hear the word shit a couple times in this podcast, but we are doing a campaign called Make Shit Better. And so I have with me today and the podcast Ed Kent, our Health, Safety, and Environment Coordinator for the district, and Dayna Sykes, who is our Education Coordinator for District 3, and we're going to talk about this campaign. So I don't know who wants to kick it off, but what are we doing? What is Make Shit Better all about, Dayna?
Yeah, thanks. It's not just an excuse to say shit on a podcast, but I'm not going to complain. I don't mind. We can talk about shit a lot. So this campaign started as a result from having some conversations with some of our members to talk about, they raised issues about what the situation was like in their workplace. And especially I want to shout out to the Women of Steel who really brought this up in Women of Steel in industrial settings where they were not getting access to washrooms. So we thought we'd dig a bit deeper into how shitty our workplaces are and have some conversations and start with a survey, talk to our members and figure out what's going on. As part of that too, I'm not going to lie, I got really into it and started researching washrooms and washroom dignity. There's a few campaigns that have gone on internationally, but also campaigns within our province where we in BC have managed to get some regulations around running water in washrooms, but that's just in construction. So yeah, we did some surveys, did some research. I'm probably going to focus more on the equity side of things. I think Ed's going to talk about the health and safety side of things, but even just to start that off and start off the conversation about what that equity looks like. We know historically when people are denied access, it's a clear indicator of what equity looks like in society. And the simplest way we look at it sometimes is when we think about racial segregation and how washroom access was split up at that point. But even now, when we look at how people can participate fully in our society, like this is unhoused people being denied access to a washroom. This is our trans and non-binary siblings having to plan their days around where they could be safe in a washroom or safe somewhere where they can find a washroom. This also includes people with disabilities who might not have access. And this is also parents who may not have access or the requirement to purchase things. And when we think about our workplaces, we don't think about them in that perspective. We don't think that our workplaces could be set up to deny people access, but they have. And a lot of the times that's because our workplaces weren't designed with everybody in mind. They were designed for efficiency. They were designed if you stand up and pee, you do this one function in a washroom, there you have access. But it was also what could take up the least amount of space, and that's urinals and gang showers. And so there is this other side of that, which is this quick exploitation of like time. Like we want you to shower fast. We want you to use your washroom only with one function. So if you have IBS or other health issues, you're also going to be impacted by what you're given access to.
Yeah, and everybody needs to use the washroom. You know, everybody does, and we're at work. Like I don't know how much of the time we're at work, but we're at work too much of the time probably versus not being at work, and you know that's a pretty fundamental thing, right? Being able to use the washroom in the way that you need to use the washroom. Ed, what do you think about the campaign? From your perspective?
Honestly, when we started this, you know, the reality that washrooms are an issue in 2025, I really questioned whether that was true or not. Having started this and having the input back from our members, it's beyond my ability to understand how we in this time have as many issues with washrooms that people are dealing with. A lot of our workplaces, Dayna was saying that with gender issues, a lot of our workplaces, our older workplaces, industrial workplaces, they were built with men working in those facilities, and the reality that women have now become part of those workforces, there's never been an issue to address the fact that there are women working in these workplaces. And it is some of the stories that we've gotten, that people have shared with us through the survey are absolutely shocking what people are dealing with when it comes to something that should be a fundamental that we have access to. I can't believe that we're dealing with the shit that we're dealing with, right? It's difficult to comprehend. And what I find really amazing to me is that employers put their workers that spend a great deal. We've got workers that are spending 12 hours at the workplace without access to a washroom, without ready access to a washroom throughout their shifts. It's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing.
And it's not just access. I know some of the stories we've heard about the conditions of facilities are horrendous. I know what we would do if you go into a restaurant and you go into the washroom and if there was no running water, what would you do? If there was no seat on the toilet, what would you do? But apparently that's okay for a workplace that's not publicly accessible. That's okay for our members. That's okay for workers to have to go into something that's that, disgusting and unsanitary, in addition to the access issues, in addition to the equity issues, in addition to the, I think health and safety issues. If you don't have running water and you're using the washroom, but you've just come from doing whatever you've been doing in your workplace and you don't have the ability to wash your hands before you go to the washroom, I think is forget about washing your hands after you go to the washroom. You just need to wash your hands before you go to the washroom in many of our workplaces.
Yeah, and that's an important point because, again, when we talk about workplace design and it not being set up for everyone, we were hearing stories beforehand. We were hearing stories, especially for people who menstruate. Having access to running water before you go to the washroom is kind of important, especially if you're working with toxic chemicals or dust or there's things your bodies can get exposed to. And I'm just going to be candid and gross because we're on a podcast where we're talking about shit. We may as well talk about other things. But for a person who menstruates, they need to have sanitation. And so it's not just an access thing, even though the access for them, some of the stories we heard about folks menstruating through their coveralls or having to change a tampon outside and behind a truck. Those are just parts of it, but not being able to wash your hands is kind of a big deal. And it's just not something that's really contemplated. And also from the conditions we've heard from those surveys, some of our bathrooms, I'm sure we're going to show that video eventually, but when maggots are dropping out of the ceiling, are you actually in a sanitary environment? And what is this? Are we not concerned about biohazards within our own workplaces in addition to that? That's a big concern as well.
Yeah, so good reminder to segue to the video. We did do a survey. I think one of you mentioned that we did a survey and got some responses from our members, and we made a little video that we can play. I think maybe we can play right now, and then we can start to talk a little bit about what's going to be the outcome of this campaign.
super ancient bathrooms and buildings, no upgrades, no showers or changing areas, no gender neutral, not even female specific bathrooms.
The constant bladder infections from women having to hold it due to lack of access is unhealthy and unfair.
A liquid waste bag, what the hell is this?
I've had to also go to the bathroom on the ground beside the truck.
I've been in situations where I've had to army crawl through rat feces.
Having to stay purposefully dehydrated so that you'll be able to get your job done and not make the 20-minute round trip to a washroom is unhealthy and unfair to all.
There has been an issue with flies and maggots coming out of the air vents. That's more disturbing than the other one that I just read.
The maggots? You should never have to think that we're gonna have to deal with those just to go to the washroom.
It's very frustrating as a woman to have to be completely exposed while trying to change a tampon or pad, not in an actual bathroom. Having to get half naked to relieve yourself with the possibility of anyone driving up to you or seeing you is not okay.
For non-binary or female workers, sisters, for them not to have their own change room, their own washrooms. Yeah, I don't think that's acceptable. I wouldn't want that if it was my mother, sister, daughter.
Thinking about the trans community, there are people who don't want to expose themselves in fear of hatred against pride.
These are not concerns that workers should have to deal with. These are things that are basic human rights.
I think it's a human right at the end of the day that everyone should have a safe facility to, whether it be urinate or potty, whatever it is, they should have a safe environment to really do that. It's about the bottom line for the companies, and they don't really care about the fundamental human rights of humans.
Typically, bathrooms don't make money, and that's usually where the employer wants to spend their money, is where somewhere they're going to see a profit.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to have rags around or a bottle or a jar just to, keep going.
I can't believe that we would be subjected to this kind of shit. We need to demand better from our employers. This has to come to an end. And this is why we're doing what we're doing.
It's not right, and it is unsafe, and it is unsanitary, and not the kind of workplaces that we should have.
It doesn't have to be that way. These employers need to be pushed to do the right thing. There's no way any of our members should be forced to pee off the side of a truck. It's just not right.
I think that the idea behind this, to gather the information, is the first step. But beyond that, given the responses that we have received, this is a real issue. And since we started this survey, and Dayna talked about it too, I've been looking at regulations when it comes to washroom. I've been looking at the reality of what is supposed to be provided to workers in the workplaces. And given the reports that we've had from members, there are and this, this isn't a north issue or a south issue or working in a mine or working in a forestry camp or something. This is an issue across the board. Every type of workplace that our members are working in are dealing with washroom issues.
Yeah, and even those timed breaks, like the expectation that people can, an adult can time their washroom breaks is ridiculous. And I know that for some of our members, even if they're working from home, may have issues around access where they're expected or allotted a certain amount of time during the day is ridiculous. Like, this is just a basic dignity. So one of the other studies that I looked at, which it was suddenly really apparent. So it was a National Institute of Occupational Health and Safety.
I love that everyone's doing research on their own.
Yeah, I'm such a nerd. I'm sorry. But there's not a lot of research, and a lot of the research was done from also a perspective that didn't take into account all genders. Like, let's be clear, a lot of the health and safety stuff that we've talked about, even within Raising the Bar, doesn't account for everybody. But one of the quotes I read from that, there's a couple things, and I'm going to read it. When people get too few bathroom breaks, they may be at risk for urinary tract infections and incontinence, as well as other bladder, bowel, and kidney problems. Limited bathroom access may make it difficult for people with certain chronic diseases to take medications that may result in the need for them to use the washroom more often. But this other one, which really rings true to me, was holding a full bladder makes people hurry through their work and pay less attention. And we all had that experience where if we actually, if we are holding it, I might be a bit more of a jerk than other people. Like, that's my primary focus. And if you don't turn off for that washroom, I'm going to hate you and I'm going to yell at you. But they lose focus, which means that they might also be likely to injure themselves. And it is another health and safety issue. So this whole idea of timing how we produce and how we operate at work is not based on a model that reflects everybody. Like, it's a very ableistic and a very gender-focused perspective. And that was the other thing that really stuck out to me in the surveys is our workplaces, and I think this is another piece of this that we're going to have to look into, most of them don't have accessible washrooms for people with disabilities. So this was a huge one that we looked at, that we need to look at, because that's immediately saying, as we have said with washrooms, washroom access, if there's not a washroom for me, it's telling me that I don't belong there. And a lack of accessible washrooms is telling us the same thing. So we're saying people who may need a ramp to get into the washroom, well, maybe you need to go work somewhere else because our washroom's not there. And I think it was between 80 and 90% of our workplaces didn't have accessible washrooms.
Yeah, and the other thing that's, when we, Ed sort of spoke to this, when we first started with this, it was like in my head, it was a gender thing in our male-dominated workplaces. Like, what about the woman on the mine site, and what about the women in the big steel mill? But from the survey, it's across all sectors. And Dayna, you mentioned some of our members who are more like office workers or working from home, and the issues they face about their timed washroom breaks, and other workplaces where there's you got to go ask permission, you got to go past some cameras every time you go to the wash. Like, there's a ton of issues around washrooms that aren't just the what I would say sort of egregious things about being on a mine site at with a truck and having to go a far distance, right? Like, it's across a lot of industries.
Well, and one of the things that a number of members told us is that they don't drink during the day. Mm-hmm. They're not consuming liquids during the day so that they're not having to go to the washroom. Right, because getting to the washroom is such a distance, and they're made to feel embarrassed because they asked to go to a washroom. Mm-hmm. They're having to call on a radio to ask for somebody to come and pick them up and take them to a washroom.
And of course, you're not working if you're going to the washroom, right? Which is what the boss is watching. Are you working? How hard are you working? Right.
And so they're not drinking liquids. They're not drinking water during the day. And the reality of not, being on a job for 8, 10, 12 hours and not drinking to avoid going to the washroom, that is completely, that's not a healthy way to operate, to work. You're putting yourself in, and if you're doing that on a regular basis, you're dehydrating yourself to the point that is a serious health issue.
Yeah. It makes me think, and not that this is a joking matter, but it makes me think of, like, my mom used to always say, drink lots of water, right? And don't hold it, right? But then, maybe people should listen, the managers and the bosses here should be listening to my mom. But anyway, we showed
maybe we'll send your mom out to some of those workplaces.
Well, we showed the video, and we do have a web, this is on the website. So it's USW.ca /make it better, because I think we're not supposed to say shit on our website addresses. So it's make it better. And then also, somewhere on there is the raising the bar stuff, raising the bar on women's health and safety. And, to give credit where credit is due, that campaign that was done and started in Canada with the, Women of Steel in Canada, really, like, there's a section of that talks specifically about washrooms and from a gender perspective and from an equity perspective. So please check out that stuff as well. Sorry, you wanted to say something? Go ahead.
No, I want to say so many things about this, but I will stop.
Dayna has notes if you're not watching on
No, but also
YouTube.
just on the survey, which is not in my notes. The other thing, because there were some things, I think I went in with this perspective. Like, this is, of course, an issue that was brought forward to us from Women of Steel. But other issues that came out of this, like, this is probably, we got ourselves into more work than we're possibly able to do, was the other one was the whole setup of the gang showers and just the discomfort of that. And I thought about this one a lot, and I don't know if either of you have worked in those locations, but just this expectation of starting work and suddenly you're in this room with one shower head and sharing a shower with a bunch of people. And I used to make a bit of light about it because we've had issues and complaints that came out of behaviors that were as a result of that. But there's also this major discomfort. And I'm sure for a lot of folks, it would be a deterrence to participating in that workforce as well, based on whatever. It could be a trauma-informed perspective of what their past experiences were, but also, body issues, shyness, whatever. But the expectations of this, you've got to be super hyper-masculine in this space, and you've got to just, like, suck it up. You go in the gang shower, and that's the expectation. And that is, like, a lot of the times we need to remove those toxins from our bodies. There's stuff we don't want to take home with us at the end of the day, but what we've heard is a lot of folks are skipping that step as well, or they don't have access to a shower in their workplace. And that's another thing that has really stood out for me, where I thought this was going to be a whole discussion, again, like you did, about access for women and for our trans siblings, but it wasn't. This was an access across the board. And the shower thing really is, it's a weird one. Like, it's a hard one because it's a hyper masculine environment where the expectation is just suck it up. And I like that folks were able to be vulnerable enough to say in the survey that they're not comfortable with it. And thinking about that, which is part of thinking about the washrooms, is, I'm going to say this, and probably you might need to cut it, but how cheap some of our employers are, where they aren't going to invest. Like, we've got our employers making so much money, and they can't put a washroom in underground, or they can't provide showers that provide some sort of barrier. And we should have learned some lessons around COVID where, you know what? When times get tough, we can create space for this and we can distance people. But the investment or the willing to invest in some basic dignity is alarming.
I mean, somebody said that in the video that we made, right? It doesn't bathrooms don't make money, right? And so what's the return on investment? I mean, I think part of the case we got to make is it is beneficial to the workplace. It is beneficial to people feeling better about their workplace, feeling dignified about their workplace, being productive. We're going to have to make that case, I think, to some of the employers as well, that this is I think it's a moral issue. I think it's a health and safety issue. I think it's an equity issue. But, maybe we can make the case that it's a productivity issue too, and something that's going to benefit in the long run our employers to convince them to make the investments that are necessary. I mean, it is shocking, I think, to Ed's point, in 2025 that we can't figure out a way to have running water and washroom. I mean, I know we can't. I know they can. It's just a matter of spending the money to have running water and proper facilities for anybody who's working anywhere. Right?
Well, when the employer considers the fact that allowing people to use these unsanitary facilities is likely exposing people to biohazards that can potentially cause serious health issues for those people. And you're in a communal workplace. So you're not just exposing one person, you're exposing many different people to that same biohazard. From an employer point of view, I mean, having your workers at your workplace healthy and able to do their job on a daily basis should be a priority for that employer. And I don't understand how they don't comprehend it. I don't get it. It's just beyond me. I go back and say at the beginning, I thought it would be an issue in some places, but it's everywhere. It's not just in some places. It's everywhere across the board where our members are working. And that's shocking to me. That's what is the most shocking part.
Yeah. And I think sorry, Dayna, but I think we got to get away from the sense that, it's the way it's been and it's the way it is and, just suck it up, right? Like, I never had heard the word gang showers. To me, that was just the way I played sports when I was growing up and I went to an all boys school for a little while. That was just the showers, right? Where you went into a big room and water poured out of the one. Everybody showered together. But really, when if you step back and think about that, that's like an insane way to do to expect people to shower with a bunch of other people and like from a health, just a hygiene sense, like what you're all in a room together, showering, trying to get clean at the I don't know. So anyway, I think people got to sort of step back and say, just because it's been that way forever, like it's 2025, it doesn't need to, 20 years ago, it didn't need to be like that. It certainly doesn't need to be like that today. Sorry. Dayna,
yeah. And also, who is it benefiting at the end of the day? And I think that's where we get stuck all the time. It's like, this is the way it's always been done. And we've had those conversations where people, we've asked about washroom situations and people are like, oh, well, we work in the forest. Like the world is our washroom. Yeah. And that's the way it's always been done. Or in some of our workplaces where everybody's outside, but you can bring in a washroom. There is ways around it. And there is a way to put pressure on the employers to do these things. And they do the things in a very performative way. My favorite story I heard at one of the conferences is the employers recognized because there was a push to provide menstrual products. So the employer provides it, but they find the cheapest ones they can find. They put them it's in an underground mine. So they provide it in the porta potty in an underground mine where there's no running water. So that's really great that you can provide somebody with a tampon, but they're covered in coal dust. How is this actually, how is this healthy? Good for you, but think about how the body functions and what people actually need to be safe. And I know for a lot of our sisters, they've figured out ways to work around it. They will layer up before they go to work because in some of our minds, it's just like the ditch. That's where you go. Some of our workplaces have done really good things, and our health and safety committees have pushed and our locals have pushed to have access. And then there's things we will continue to learn along the way. What happens if there's a cave-in? Where are people supposed to go? And we've learned that, if you're in coveralls and you're in the safe room, there might need to be a tent because somebody removing their coveralls might not need to be visible to the rest of the room because there's more than one gender in the workplace. So I think there is a willingness to learn and there's things we can do. It's just trying to figure out what they are. And I think that's a big step. That's a big thing that we have to focus on now as well. We've heard all these really horrific stories and we can talk about them, but what are we going to do? Mm-hmm.
So we've been doing the survey and so we were getting some feedback. We're going to compile a report, I think, about the survey results and some of the issues that we've been talking about, access, dignity, equity, in the safety aspects of washrooms and cleanup facilities in the workplace. We just have to rock, paper, scissors to figure out who's going to write that. But we are going to prepare a report. And then what? What are some of your thoughts, Ed, about what are we going to do from there? We found out what's going on. We got some sense of the issues that our members are facing, and then what? Then what are we going to do about it?
Well, I think the important next step is, we have information that tells us that employers are not doing what they need to do in the workplace. There are occupational health and safety regulations. There are health code laws that require. I think it would be important for us to approach those employers, especially the most egregious ones, but all of them eventually, and start bringing this issue to the forefront with them as an employer and showing them that there is an obligation that they have They have to provide these facilities for their workers and take it to the next step. If they're not willing to come to the table and address the issue, then there are steps that we can go above and beyond. And we may, for some of those employers, I think we probably will have to do that, right?
Dayna?
Yeah, and also, I have not fully researched all of the regulatory frameworks in our provinces, but we might have to put some pressure on the government as well.
Yeah.
Like, we can't be the people doing all the inspections, but we do need to make sure that people are provided access, and not just doing a head count. Like, oh, we've got 20 women in this workplace, so we only need to have 5 facilities. Like, it's also that travel distance. Mm-hmm. Like, how long is it taking folks to get there? Yeah. Do they need to call somebody to give them a ride? Like, there's a lot of other factors. You can't just put a human into this numerical factor of how people can actually use the washroom based on a study that was done on bodies that didn't reflect theirs and based on able-bodied, healthy people. So, yeah, I think we need to do a lot of research into what the regulations require, but also how that fits realistically. And maybe that's including our members in those conversations and including the locals in what they want to see and how we can put the pressure on. I know that some of our folks are already taking actions and putting their foot down on certain things, but there's a lot more that needs to be done to address these things.
Yeah. So, certainly I think, awareness is big, getting our health and safety committees, I think, to work on this in the workplaces. I think, having our human rights and other committees working on it from equity and access perspective, and then, legislative action, changing regulations, maybe getting them enforced. And, I think lastly, like shame on the shitty employers. No pun intended.
We haven't said shitty enough.
Yeah, shame on the shitty employers.
Shame on the shitty employers.
And, saying like, you're operating a business, you're making a bunch of money, and this is how you treat your workforce. Maybe the steps that we have to take. I really want to thank you, Ed and Dayna, for joining us on Strong as Steel, episode 17. Everyone who's listening, watching, please join us in our campaign to make shit better in our workplaces, in steelworker workplaces across Western and Northern Canada, but I think in all of our workplaces. And if you have any comments or questions, you can reach us at D3comms at usw.ca. So D, the number 3, COMMS at usw.ca, and follow us on all of our social media channels at USW District 3. And again, I think this is a campaign that, I thought was going to be a little bit narrow in focus when we started talking about it, but I really think is something that I know it's something that all of us as steelworkers, all of us as working folks should get behind. I mean, there's bathroom dignity is something that's important to everyone. And I think we need to make shit better. One more time.
Yeah, we said
make shit better. Make shit better.
Okay, so thanks everyone for listening to the Strong as Steel podcast.